Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cultured Poll List. Today's episode is episode 26 of our first season, and we are going to be covering DC's Blackest Night, the 8-issue miniseries that came out in 2009. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Michael Malillo from Casual Experts. Little disclaimer before we get started: my normal co host, Luke, is not going to be really in these podcast episodes for a little bit. He'll only be a part of it for the review and discussion portion. He's had some technical difficulties with his internet and he's moving and all that kind of stuff. So even when he is on the show for the review part, he's only going to be there for, you're only going to hear audio. I won't be able to have video for him. So I'm going to be handling all the summary aspects. So yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know that going forward. This will only last for about next like 5 episodes or so, but just wanted to give y'all a heads up. But this week we are tackling Blackest Night, which is, I would argue, one of the biggest DC crossover events that have happened. Probably, I mean, at least the last 20 or 30 years, if not ever. And this does follow Green Lantern Rebirth and The Flash Rebirth, which we have covered on the show before. So if you haven't watched those episodes, definitely check them out. They're on our channel. And this also follows Final Crisis and Infinite Crisis. So a lot of people have died. Like Ted Core died in Infinite Crisis, but probably the biggest death or presumed death is Bruce Wayne, Batman, who was killed by Darkseid in Final Crisis, or at least that is implied. Though it's said in this story that Tim Drake does not believe he's dead. But we'll get into that a little later. Um, Also, Aquaman is Arthur Curry is dead at this point as well. DC was kind of going through a thing of just killing off all their characters. But before we get into the story, I also wanted to mention the Lantern Corps, the different Lantern Corps, because there are quite a few that are mentioned in this story that have been introduced previously. So we have and they're all part of the emotional spectrum, so they're all emotions. So you have the Green Lantern Corps, obviously, which is which represents willpower, powered by willpower. Then you have the Sinestro Corps, or the Yellow Lanterns, powered by fear. Then you have the Blue Lanterns, whose power is hope. The Orange Lanterns, powered by avarice or greed. And there's only one of them, Larfleeze, because he doesn't want to share his power with anybody else. Kind of funny. Then we have the Indigo Tribe, powered by compassion. We have the Red Lanterns that are representative of rage. And then we have the Star Sapphires, who stand for love and breast implants, apparently. So, let's get into the actual story, Blackest Night. Blackest Night was written by Geoff Johns, art by Ivan Reis and Doug Mahnke. The inkers are Eau Claire Albert, Joe Prado, Rob Hunter, Julio Ferreira, Christian Alamy. The letterers are Nick J. Napolitano and Rob Lay. The colorists are Alex Sinclair, Rod Reese, and Randy Mayer. And this series was published from June 2009 to May 2010. So, our story begins with a bit of a prologue, showing the origins of the villain Black Hand, one of Green Lantern's villains. We get to see him grow up around his father, who ran a morgue. And we see throughout his childhood he had a fascination with death that kind of alienated him from his parents and from having any friends. But one night, while he's at the morgue, at the funeral home, Atrocitus, well, a big alien, a big red alien, which we learn as Atrocitus, breaks through the window of the funeral home and attacks Black Hand, whose real name is William Hand, and says that his insides hold the doorway to absolute darkness, and he has this interesting weapon. But before he's able to use it on William, Sinestro, before he was evil, I guess, before he betrayed the Green Lanterns, and Hal Jordan show up and stop Atrocitus, but they don't notice the weapon, which William takes. And it turns out that it collects Green Lantern energy, and which can be used as a weapon. So then we see William Hand become an actual villain, fight the Green Lanterns, get defeated multiple times, and then we see the scene that we saw in Green Lantern Rebirth, where Hal Jordan as the Spectre burns away William Hand's hand. And apparently there's a bunch of other stuff happened to William. He was abducted by aliens that gave him his hand back. Yeah, lots of weird stuff. But now he's just hanging out, noticing or saying that he can feel all of the death in the DC universe. Basically, we see Hal Jordan dying as Parallax, Barry Allen dying, Superman dying, all this other stuff. And we see that he has traveled to his parents' house, and he proceeds to kill his entire family with Atrocitus, his old weapon, his Green Lantern powered weapon. And then he proceeds to kill himself. But then we see a Guardian of the Universe show up, and she vomits a black ring, which attaches itself to William and resurrects him as a Black Lantern. And what's interesting is throughout this book, we will see that the Black Lantern logo is the logo of William Hand's father's funeral home, which is rather interesting, or his mortuary, same thing, whatever. But anyway, back to the story. So we cut to Hal Jordan. He's at Bruce Wayne's grave. Even though they weren't like the closest of friends, they definitely did share moments. And throughout this scene, we do see a flashback of Batman and Hal sharing a moment. Then Barry shows up and says that he doesn't have much time because he's been protecting Gotham since Batman has been presumed dead. And the two reminisce about Geoff Johns, Martian Manhunter, who was killed recently, as well as Arthur Curry, Aquaman. But then we see all these other graves. Sue Dibney, Elongated Man's wife. We see Hawkman and Hawkgirl and Adam. And we see the grave of Ronnie Raymond. And we see Black Hand pulling out some skull from a grave, and we're not sure exactly who it is. And we see he seems to be drawing some sort of power from the skull, potentially. And then we see this really big black lantern power battery and a bunch of black rings flying out. And yeah, Black Hand doing some freaky stuff with the skull. So that is the prologue. Now on to the main story, which opens with a big parade in Coast City. And it's revealed that on the day that Superman was killed by Doomsday, after he was resurrected, it became a national day where people remembered all of the fallen heroes that have stayed dead. And also Hal kind of goes talking about the different tragedies, all the different lanterns his friends have gone through. Like John Stewart has had his love killed, and Kyle Rayner has had his girlfriends die as well. Jade, Alan Scott's daughter, as well as his other girlfriend who was killed by Major Force and stuffed in his fridge. Real nice. And then it seems like Guy Gardner's the only one who's actually been able to keep a stable relationship with Ice, a fellow Justice League member. And we basically just see a bunch of other characters grieving for fallen people like Clark Kent, Connor, Ma Kent at Jonathan Kent's grave. There's Martin Stein and the current two, Jason Rush, and I forget her name, but they make up the current Firestorm, and they're at Ronnie Raymond's grave. And then there's a bunch of other people seems like the Justice Society of America graveyard. And then we cut to Mira and Aqualad, and I think he's Tempest now, but they're at Aquaman's grave. And we see Alfred bringing flowers to Bruce's grave, but it has been dug up, and this seems like it is the grave that Black Hand has dug up. So then we cut to Barry and Hal. They're at this underground. Well, I believe it's at the Hall of Justice, and it's this mortuary, this grave, whatever, mass grave, I guess, for a lot of supervillains, because apparently there had been some people that have been trying to steal dead supervillain remains. And Barry tells Hal that he wants to know, like, how many people have died since he was gone, because he was gone in the Speed Force for a long time. And he shows him, like, all of these people, which, yeah, kind of crazy, kind of a lot. When I was reading this, I didn't realize how many people in the DC universe had died over the last, I don't know. Well, in like actual time, Barry Allen died in 85, I believe. So pretty much like the last like 20 years of comics, all of these people had died. So yeah, kind of crazy, really. And yeah, so then Barry just sees some of his friends, like Elongated Man and Firestorm, that died, and he's the big sad. So then we cut to Hawkman. He's mad. He's at his home, and he's mad because Adam wants him to visit Adam's ex-wife's grave, but she killed Elongated Man's wife previously in another storyline. It was really weird and complicated, but he's mad that Adam would even ask him, to go visit his murderous ex-wife grave. But then, Hot Girl is like, maybe you should go. He's your best friend. He needs you right now. Then we see Adam all depressed. Then we cut to the Guardians of the Universe, and they're basically saying, we've failed. The Light War is happening. We're all screwed. And then all of a sudden, one of the Guardians decides to just bite into the others and start slaughtering them and rip out their hearts. And we see the Green Lanterns in space patrolling, and they see a bunch of Black Lantern or a bunch of black rings flying at him. And we just kind of see this large panel of a bunch of really smaller panels, and the main point of this is that we just see a bunch of the rings going to different people that have died and resurrecting them, like Ronnie Raymond, Geoff Johns, Martian Manhunter, Aquaman, a bunch of people. And yeah, so then all these people show up in space to confront the lanterns, the Green Lanterns, except for the ones that were resurrected on Earth. We'll see them later. We'll actually see them right now because Barry and Hal decide to go back to the Hall of Justice after investigating Bruce's grave that had been dug up. We see in this panel here, Alfred had called them over and told them about it. But while they're at the Hall of Justice, either that or the Watchtower, I don't remember which, undead, resurrected Martian Manhunter attacks them. So then we cut back to Hawkman and Hawkgirl, and we see somebody sneaking up behind them, and what's interesting is this person sees them as emotions, as radiating emotions. We see Hawkgirl's radiating love, and Hawkman is radiating anger or rage. And there's kind of like this stuff going on between them because this is Kendra, or I think Kendra Saunders, something like that, and she is like a resurrected version of Hawkgirl, and she doesn't have any of her memories, and he remembers her as she is, and she's not sure if she loves him, and she's about to profess her love for him when she gets stabbed. So yeah, fun times. It turns out Elongated Man has been resurrected as well as his or no, not his ex-wife, his dead wife. And they beat the crap out of Hawkman and Hawkgirl and kill them. And then Black Hand shows up, and he pukes out a couple rings with Bruce's skull. And we see the rings say power levels at 0.01%, and this increases as the story goes on. So then we see Ray Palmer. He calls Hawkman again and tries to convince him, but Hawkman answers. But at this point, Hawkman is now a Black Lantern. He tells Ray to come right over because Ray can like travel through the phone lines or whatever. So then we cut to Gotham City. We see Barbara Gordon and Jim Gordon on the roof calling the bat signal. Not really sure why, because Batman's dead, but I don't remember if they explain it or not. But as they're talking about coffee, Hal Jordan crashes into the bat signal thrown there by Martian Manhunter. Then we go to Mira and Aqualad to Tempest, and Tempest had convinced Mira to take Arthur's body from the mainland to be buried in Atlantis. But when they arrive at the grave is dug up, and we see he has become a Black Lantern. So a fight ensues, and he starts ripping the hearts out of the Atlanteans, and we see his point of view, and he sees fear radiating off of the Atlanteans. And it seems like the Black Lanterns see emotions radiating off of people, and we'll learn a little more why later. Then we cut to Boston Brand, and he's freaking out because his body is being resurrected, but he's a disembodied soul. So he's just kind of watching his body become a Black Lantern, and he's not happy about it. And yeah, so then we see the graves of Hawk and Dove, who are both dead. Hawk gets resurrected as a Black Lantern, but Dove does not. It seems like the Black Lantern rings cannot reach him. There seems to be like some force field around him. So then we cut back to the Atlantean Aquaman Mira Tempest fight. Kind of keeps going on. Seems and Aquaman, or the Black Lantern Aquaman, tries to get into Mira's head. Then we cut to Boston Brand's grave, and we see a bunch of magic characters there kind of trying to figure out what's going on. And then we see a Black Lantern Pariah show up, and he attacks them, and he tries to attach rings to each of them, but the only one he's actually able to is Spectre. And the kind of a battle ensues for the control over Spectre's current host. Then the battle continues flat between Martian Manhunter, Flash, and Green Lantern. Green Lantern says he needs to borrow Jim Gordon's car. We'll see why in a minute. The Aquaman battle continues, but Garth, Aqualad, aka Tempest, is killed by his ex-girlfriend, and his heart is ripped out, and he becomes a Black Lantern. So now basically all the Atlanteans versus Mira, so Mira gets the hell out of there. And then we see why Green Lantern wanted the car. He chucks it at Martian Manhunter and it explodes, and the fire, is Martian Manhunter's weakness, so it seems to knock him off balance for a second. And we kind of cut between Barry and Hal talking about what the hell is going on. And the Green Lanterns fighting the Black Lanterns in space. But before long, Martian Manhunter shows up again, but this time with Firestorm, Elongated Man, and the Hawks. So then we go to Jason Rush and Jen, his girlfriend, who are Firestorm, and there's kind of a not super important conversation between them. It's kind of a girlfriend-boyfriend thing. But then they get a buzzer to, go be Firestorm because they're needed. So battle continues between Hal and Barry and these resurrected Justice League members. And Barry tries to take the ring off of Firestorm, but he discovers that the rings are bound to their hosts, and taking them off just hurts and kills the host. So yeah, battle rages on, and then we see Ray Palmer, aka the Atom, spring out of the Hawkman's ring. It turns out he was able to survive his encounter with them and shrunk down inside the ring. And he basically says that he was able to shrink down and go inside and see the inside of the ring, and that it's not like any ring he's seen before. It's very unlike the Green Lantern rings, and he says that it's laced with microscopic wormholes that are channeling some unknown energy. Then we cut to the Hall of Justice. Firestorm gets there, and it turns out Mira was the one that sent out the alert that they got to show up. And she attacks them at first until she realizes who they are, and she's saying like, "Hey, there's some weird shit going on." So the battle continues back to Hal and Barry and the Black Lanterns, and Interestingly, we see the Black Lanterns look at the Atom, and we see that he's exuding compassion, because I think he's being attacked by his ex-wife, and even though she did horrible things, he still has compassion for her. So I think that's where that's coming from. But just as she's about to rip out his heart, the Indigo tribe shows up. And at this point, they're very mysterious. Like, nobody knows anything about them, but they're actually able to channel the Green Lantern energy and uh destroy well sever the connection between the ring and one of the Black Lanterns. After the Indigo tribe saves Barry and Hal, they all regroup at the Hall of Justice, and the leader of the Indigo tribe explains that, like, at the beginning of the universe, everything was this white light, but then there was this darkness that showed up and fought the light, and it basically splintered the light into the different emotions, basically, that all living things share, and like these emotions can be channeled into power, which is basically all of the different lantern cores. And she explains that the Green Lanterns are really the only ones that are able to sever the connection. Yeah, so the green light is, I guess, the balance of the different emotional spectrum energies, and it's essential to severing the or the Black Lantern. It basically weakens the Black Lantern rings and makes them able or susceptible to being destroyed. Um, so that's all explained, and Barry explains to everyone that, he's pretty sure the Black Lanterns aren't actually their friends; they're just the rings using their bodies as hosts, basically, and just using their memories and their connections to them to invoke emotions from them. But before they can get too much of a rest, the Black Lanterns show up again and start beating the crap out of everybody. And Dead Firestorm, attacks Current Firestorm, and he's actually able to pull Jason away from Jen, so they're no longer Firestorm. And then Jason runs over and touches him, which I'm pretty sure this is Deathstorm. So Jason runs over and tries to stop Deathstorm from hurting Jen, but he only ends up being combined with Deathstorm, and now, like, they're together, kind of like Martin Stein was Ronnie Raymond's, like, thing in his head, and Deathstorm turns Jen into, like, table salt or something, which is, yeah, kind of messed up. And meanwhile, the Black Lantern rings are starting to say, like, power levels rising to 56% and growing. And so then Deathstorm somehow copies and sends out a bunch of Black Lantern rings into the dead bodies of the dead villains. So now they're resurrected. Got Maxwell Lord, Copperhead, Dr. Light, a few others. So yeah, we see the battle raging on between, all the heroes and the Black Lanterns. Barry is almost caught by Deathstorm, but Jason is able to take control of the body briefly, and he manages to hold off the Black Lanterns so that Adam, Mira, and Flash can escape through telephone wires. They actually end up in a 911 call center, so that's fun. Then we see briefly Scarecrow, which is going to be important later, but there's a Black Lantern there who turns out to be Azrael, and he's just killing everybody and seeing everyone exuding fear, but Scarecrow isn't, and he mentions, it's revealed that he only feels fear for the Batman, who's not around. So Azrael leaves him alone because he can't. I don't remember. I think it might have been earlier when the Indigo Tribe lady said stuff, but I think she revealed that the Black Lanterns feed off of the light of the other emotions, so that's why they need to draw emotions from people and then kill them, and then sap their energy from their emotions. Then we cut to Lex Luthor, and he's basically just preparing to hunker down in his bunker and fight anybody. And we have this kind of messed up scene where these lesser Flash villains the Rainbow Raiders end up killing themselves because they think, they're going to join the Black Lantern Corps. But right as they die, there's this narration from Barry that says, as far as we know, only the dead that have emotional ties to us are rising. The rest are staying in their graves. And then they just kind of slowly pans out, and we see the Rainbow Raiders just staying dead, not becoming Black Lanterns, kind of morbid humor. But then Mira and Adam are kind of having doubts, saying, like, we can't you know, take on these Black Lanterns. And Flash gives them a pep talk and is basically like, no, you're both badass. You basically need to step up and be the Superman and Wonder Woman we need right now, which I'm not. I mean, I think the only reason this is because Superman and Wonder Woman are somewhere else. Like, they are still around, but at this time, Mira and Adam are the only ones that really know what's going on with the Black Lanterns along with Flash. So Flash says he's going to rally the troops, go around the world, and alert the rest of the superheroes, while Mira and Adam need to figure out how to hold off the Black Lanterns for now. And Adam has an idea to find Alan Scott, the original Green Lantern, because his power might be able to fend off the Black Lanterns. So that's exactly what they do, and they end up at the Justice. They end up with the Justice Society, who is fighting Black Lanterns of their own. And then we see Barry going around the world. He's telling Wonder Woman, Green Arrow, Black Canary, the Titans, all those people. And Adam tells Alan to use his powers to stop the Black Lanterns. And it works briefly, but soon the Black Lanterns are able to break free. And they end up killing this one guy, Damage, who I mentioned earlier. His dad shows up and takes his heart, which is nice. So at this point, we see that the power levels are actually at 100%. We're not exactly sure what that means yet, but it seems like the Black Lantern rings have been siphoning off the energy they've been feeding off of the dead people and sending it to the central power battery. Barry ends up running to Coast City, and because he feels like something's going wrong, and then all of a sudden the giant Black Lantern power battery is transported from the, I believe, sector like 666 or something. Yeah, space sector 666, the planet Ryut, which is important later, but this is the resting place. This planet is the resting place of the remains of the Anti-Monitor from Crisis on Infinite Earths. So the giant Black Lantern power battery is transported to Earth, right to Coast City, and we see it rising from the Earth. We see that Guardian. We see a bunch of Black Lanterns. We see Black Hand, who says Necron rise, and then we see Necron, the Lord of the Dead, rising, and he says to Barry that you owe me a life. So while all of this is going on, Hal Jordan had gone and collected the leaders of all the other Lantern Corps to come and help the battle on Earth. So back to Necron and Barry, and Necron basically says that he has claim over Barry because Barry was supposed to be dead, but he allowed him to escape and come back to life, but now he wants him back, basically. And Barry tries to fight him off, but Black Hand is able to overpower him. But then the Justice League and the Titans show up to help. And there's a lot of fighting in this. I'm going to kind of skim over a lot of it, but because it's kind of hard to describe all of this, so it's better to just show you stuff. But yeah, so there's battles. That weird Black Lantern corrupted Guardian attacks Barry and tries to take his heart, but then Hal shows up with the leaders of the different Lantern Corps, and they try to use their combined power to destroy the central Black Lantern power battery, which does not work. And then another ring pops out of the power battery and animates the dead skull of Bruce Wayne, which becomes Batman, and it elicits his corpse coming back to life, elicits an emotional response, and all of the Justice League, all the heroes that had died in the past and had come back to life, like Green Arrow, Superboy, Superman, Wonder Woman, and rings sprout out of him and take over them. So now there's like a Black Lantern Justice League, which is fun. and two rings actually pop out and start going after Hal and Barry because they both died and came back. And Necron wants to claim them again as bring them back to the dead. Hal and Barry are able to evade the rings, and Barry's actually able to take them forward in time like 2 seconds, which severs the connection. Apparently, so the Batman coming back to life with the whole emotional connection, with the whole emotions that it rose from the heroes, the Black Lantern rings like connected to them via their emotional response, basically. But um, going into the future severed that response. Then some stuff goes on where I think Sue, I don't know, somebody ends up taking. No, it's Ray Palmer's ex-wife, Jean Loring. I think she's able to shrink Mira and Adam down and go into one of the rings, but then Deadman shows up and possesses her body and is able to help them out, and they're able to escape the ring. Then like the battle rages on, and Ganthet, one of the Guardians, reveals that all of the rings actually have the ability to duplicate and deputize somebody else for like 24 hours. So he deputizes himself as a Green Lantern, but then all the other Lantern rings duplicate and find deputies. The Blue Lantern finds Flash, Barry Allen. The Orange Lantern finds Lex Luthor, or the Orange Ring finds Lex Luthor right as he's being attacked by Black Lanterns. And we see Mira gets a Red Lantern ring. Ray Palmer, the Atom, gets an Indigo Lantern ring. Scarecrow gets a Sinestro Core ring, and Wonder Woman gets a Star Sapphire ring, which actually breaks her bond with the Black Lantern ring. Which, let's just take a moment and admire this really cool shot. It's probably one of my favorite shots. There are a lot of double panel shots in this book that are really cool, but this is one of my, if not my favorite. It's just so cool. But anyway, the original lanterns and the newly deputized lanterns all attack Necron, which they're able to fight him and Black Hand for a bit, but then things start to kind of go to hell when Lex Luthor starts to succumb to the avarice of the ring, and he starts trying to steal all all the other lanterns rings. Meanwhile, John Stewart is rushing to try and get back to Earth, but the Black Lanterns are following him. But right when they're about to attack Earth, Guy Gardner and Kyle Rayner show up with reinforcements, basically all of the members of all the other Green Lantern Corps. They're not green, not just Green Lantern, all the other lanterns, red, yellow, Star Sapphire, everyone, blue. And then we also see that Dove is somehow able to tap into the white energy of life that, was the original source of life in the universe, but they never really explain how, really. And it's kind of short lived. And then we see that there's actually something trapped in the Black Lantern power battery, which we're not sure what yet, but it's trying to break out. And then we see Necron and Black Hand use the heart of a Guardian that they just killed to um, basically perform some ritual and cause something to rise. This is like big white entity. Um, yeah, that's what it looks like. And then Necron starts to try and kill it. And Ganthet explains to Hal that it's called the Entity, and it's basically the embodiment of the white life energy that the Indigo tribe lady mentioned earlier, that all of the other emotional spectrum energies derive from, and Necron is trying to kill it, which will kill pretty much all life. And apparently it was on Earth because life began on Earth, and the Guardians, I guess, hid that. But so apparently the entity was just hanging out on Earth this whole time, and Necron rose um, rose it up out of the Earth. But Sinestro gets pissed that the Guardians had been lying this whole time, and kind of takes that anger and goes and uh, tries to protect the entity, kind of combines with it, and becomes a White Lantern, which is really badass. So then Sinestro and the Lanterns, they attack Necron, but even though Sinestro is able to kill Necron, he just keeps resurrecting because Necron says, you can never get rid of the darkness or death. And he's actually able to overpower Sinestro and separate him from the white light. So it's kind of a last ditch effort. All the remaining lanterns and heroes attack all the other Black Lanterns, all the remaining Black Lanterns. And in the middle of the battle, Deadman actually possesses Guy Gardner. And he explains to Hal that he had been jumping around possessing the bodies of different Black Lanterns. And he discovered that Necron is basically just like the embodiment. He's basically just sentient blackness, and the only reason he's able to take form and fight them is because he has a tether to the land of the living, and they put two and two together that Black Hand is this tether, so they know they have to somehow sever Black Hand from Necron, so he can't be his tether anymore. And Necron keeps blathering on about, how they all like belong to him, all the people that were resurrected from the dead. And there's like this rousing speech from Barry that, life doesn't give us purpose. We give life purpose. And Hal says, you didn't allow us to come back from the dead, Necron. You may have opened the door, but we chose to come back. And that goes for everyone that came back. And so he ends up launching himself and combining with the entity himself. But not only does he become a White Lantern, but all of the Black Lantern, all of the living heroes that had been possessed by the Black Lantern rings become part of this like White Lantern Corps, which super freaking cool. Like I really love seeing Superman as a White Lantern. I don't know why it is so cool. They all look really cool to be honest. But so they fight Necron. Actually, no, they're able to combine their energy with the actual entity and bring Black Hand back to life and sever his tie to his Black Lantern ring, uh, which starts to weaken Necron. And then another ring actually passes through everyone and goes into the power battery and revives the corpse of the anti-monitor, which is actually inside the Black Lantern power battery. It has apparently been powering it. And so the anti-monitor fights Necron very briefly, but Necron, I guess, is able to use the last reserves of his power to send the anti-monitor back to his own universe. So that was kind of pointless. It felt like. But at this point, Black Hand is pretty much completely coming back to life, so it's kind of too late for Necron, and he is obliterated. But all the White Lantern rings leave their respective hosts and kind of just go off somewhere else. And they actually start reviving pretty much everyone. So pretty much everyone who was a Black Lantern is now back to life. So the Hawks, Aquaman, like everyone. So everyone gets reunited. Happy ending. Mira and Aquaman are reunited. The Hawks are reunited. Martian Manhunter is back. And with the closing panels, we see Barry Allen and Hal Jordan back where they started at the beginning at Bruce Wayne's grave. But Barry mentions that the resurrected Black Lantern Batman didn't seem to recognize them, so he theorizes that Bruce is actually still alive somewhere. And the last panel is just kind of this tease that shows a big crater that these random bystanders had discovered, and there is a single white lantern in the center of this crater. And that is where Blackest Night wraps up. Okay, let's start in 3, 2, 1. All right, so was this your first time reading this book?
Yes, it was.
Cool. What did you think overall?
I thought that it was interesting. It was an interesting concept.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Death Lanterns, it was kind of a cool idea.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of interesting the way So like this was similar in the way that they're doing the current Night Terrors story. They have like a bunch of like one shot, like two shot
Yeah.
issues with other standalone characters. So I thought it was interesting the characters that they chose to focus on in the main in the core eight technically nine issues.
Yeah.
Um, because it seems like in the first part it's like the Flash, Mira, and Adam in like the first four or five issues, but then
Yeah.
like around issue six it switches to the Green Lantern, and I thought that was interesting why that they chose those characters specifically, you know, because like I
Right.
mean technically like Superman, I mean Batman's not here currently because of Final Crisis I think, but Wonder
Yeah.
Woman, Superman and all those characters are still around, so I found that kind of interesting.
Yeah, like they show up eventually, like towards the end when there's
Yeah.
like the huge battle. But Flash even says to like Adam and Mira, like you're, I think he said like what you're Superman and Wonder Woman
Yeah.
for now.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. It might just be, I don't know, Geoff Johns likes those characters and wanted to give them more time to
Yeah.
shine, or maybe they just
Probably.
wanted to go for characters that are less, don't really get the spotlight that much. I
Mhm,
mean,
mhm.
Flash I get because Geoff Johns obviously really likes writing the Flash.
Right. Right.
But yeah, and I did think it was interesting um, that it didn't focus so much on Green Lanterns because you would think the whole
Yeah.
story would be like Green Lantern, like Hal Jordan and maybe some of the others. But
Right.
this like the Green Lanterns did have a huge role, but they were more like their story was more scattered throughout, and then like the last few issues.
Mhm,
But yeah, I
mhm,
did read this a long time ago. I think I was probably like in high school, maybe, or maybe a little
mm.
older. I don't really remember, but I read it a long time ago. But really, the only things I really remembered was like Sinestro getting the White Lantern ring,
Mm.
and like a few other like small things. So this was almost like reading it brand new. But
Sure.
yeah, I thought it was like I'm really a sucker for like all the Green Lantern core, just like the whole idea of
Yeah.
like the emotional spectrum, like having different like a core, like a whole green, like a whole lantern core for each one. I
Mhm,
think is a
mhm.
really cool concept, but then just the way it looks on the page is just
Yeah.
super cool. Like the different colors, the way the different suits are designed.
Mhm.
And then the way like each lantern from each respective core has like a different variation of the suit, like no Green
Right.
Lantern, no two Green Lantern suits are the same, no two Blue Lantern suits are the same, all that.
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
find it interesting that each core has a different, like they don't operate exactly the same. Like they all have rings and lanterns, and that's kind of it because like with say with that Indigo lanterns, they're able to like
Yeah.
channel other energy from the other lanterns, which I thought was interesting. And
Mm.
like the red lanterns basically like their heart stops and they are able to like vomit
Yeah.
that like red whatever the hell like blood or whatever, but it's like acid blood or
Mm.
something like that. It's kind of interesting. And
Yeah.
the way like the I think the blue lanterns are more like support for the green lanterns. um
Mm.
I find all that very interesting. I think the like yellow and green lanterns are the only ones that very much just stick to like making constructs. um
Yeah. And the one that's always interesting to me was the Orange Lantern. It's just
yeah,
like one guy, and he's
Larfleet.
like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
exactly.
think that's so perfect that it should because it's avarice, greed, so it's
Right. Right.
one lantern having the whole thing, and there's even like that part where um he goes after Lex Luthor for having another, for
Yeah.
being another Orange Lantern. I thought that was fun, and it was really cool seeing all of the Lantern cores, like teaming up together, which was pretty cool.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I thought the concept of the Black Lanterns was very interesting, and just the way that they resurrected a bunch
Mm.
of like I kind of like I kind of forgot how many freaking DC characters died, but when Hal
Yeah.
was showing Barry everyone who died while Barry was gone, it was like damn,
Mhm.
so many people. Like I forgot DC in like I don't know like the 80s and 90s were just like hey let's just kill everyone every week.
Right. Right.
But the way they resurrected them and basically made them like zombies was interesting, and
Mhm.
the way that it was and also the way that the Black Lanterns basically fed off of the emotions of
Yeah.
their
That was very interesting.
victims. Yeah, that was a really cool concept and
Mhm.
made them pretty formidable opponents, especially considering they were only resurrecting people that had emotional connections to like the main
Yeah.
characters. And I really
Right.
liked at the end that it was like they basically made like a white lantern kind of thing
Mhm.
because there was like I guess the um I don't know, the entity of life, I guess, was like
Yeah.
trapped inside. Oh yeah, and then it was like the anti-monitor was trapped inside the Black Lantern like power
Hmm.
battery. They had like a
Hmm.
lot of like layers in this story that made it pretty interesting, and it was a very cool
Yeah.
crossover. Like it felt very like a very big and climactic crossover
Yeah,
event,
yeah. Because we talked
which
about how it only
yeah,
focuses on a couple characters, but then like if you look, there's like panels where like everybody's there. There's like
yeah,
Starfire shows up for a little bit. There's Cyborg. All these characters show up throughout the story, so it feels very big. Yeah.
yeah. Toward like at some point, like the Justice League, the Justice Society, and the Titans are all like fighting at certain
Right.
parts in the story, which makes it interesting. Um, and I really liked how like some of the main characters they focused on basically all got a lantern ring. Um,
Mhm.
and I kind of forgot that that wasn't the end. I kind of thought that once they got those, they were able to rally and just kind of defeat the Black Lanterns. I forgot there was more to it.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
I am kind of a sucker for like the concept of superheroes getting, you know,
Yeah.
extra powers, even if it's
Right.
briefly, like a lantern ring. Like, I think even at some point, I don't know if it's like an Elseworlds thing. Like I think Batman gets like a yellow lantern
Yeah, I
ring or
think I remember
something.
seeing that somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, so just that I found that really interesting. I really liked that Scarecrow got a yellow lantern ring.
Mm.
That was really fun. Because he basically used his ring to make the kind of stuff that his fear toxin would make, but he didn't need the fear toxin. He just used his ring to like make these like
Right.
nightmarish constructs. I thought that was really cool. But
Mhm.
like seeing Barry as like a blue lantern, that was really cool. To remember. Oh yeah, that was kind of interesting seeing the Atom as like an indigo lantern. He was like tiny, but he still had
Yeah.
like the staff and everything. But yeah, I
Mhm.
thought that was all cool. And with the whole Black Lantern thing, there was kind of some horror elements which were fun.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
I guess they had already introduced Necron in an earlier
Yeah.
story, but just the
Mhm.
fact that he made his own like death core was interesting. And
Right.
I did think it was funny that, like in a morbid way, that team, like the Rainbow Raiders or whatever, they basically took like the powers of the original Rainbow Raider, who I guess was a Flash villain. But
Oh.
they were like, well, it seems like everyone's done. It seems like the Black Lanterns are taking over. We might as well join the winning team. So they killed themselves. And then, like,
Mm.
right as they kill themselves, there's like a voiceover, like a narration from Barry saying, like, yeah, it seems like the only people being resurrected by the rings are the ones that have emotional connections to us. Like it just
Yeah.
shows like right as their dead bodies are strewn over the floor. It's kind of
Mhm.
funny.
Yeah.
I really liked the artwork. I
Mhm. Yeah.
think I think his name is Ivan Reese.
Mhm.
He does a really good job. I like the way he has kind of a lifelike approach, but who him and whoever did the colors, they really pop
Yes.
like with the different lantern cores. It looks really cool. I feel like there's room for more like abstract or like crazy designs when it comes to comic art, but I feel like when it comes
Mhm.
to really big epic stories, I really prefer
Yeah.
the more lifelike approach, with
Sure.
like vibrant colors and stuff. So I think they did a really good job with that.
Yeah.
And I will say about like Geoff Johns, I know he's like gotten kind of a bad rap because of everything that happened with you know DC movies and stuff that he was a part of, and Zack Snyder's Justice League, all that stuff. And like I really haven't read anything recently, but he's like a really good comic writer in like the 90s
Yeah.
to 2000s. He like tackled so many stories, and
Mhm.
almost all of them are really good. Like I feel like some people have
Yeah.
started to kind of like shit on his writing, his comic writing after the whole like debacle and stuff he was involved with in the movies, but I
Mm.
really haven't read a story of his that I disliked.
Right.
And I feel like he
Right.
really breathed new life into Hal Jordan and Barry Allen in the
Mm.
2000s, bringing them back and really
Yeah.
adding to their lore. Like he really added that whole thing with Reverse Flash killing Flash's mom and orchestrating all
Mm.
that stuff. And um, he kind of retconned Hal Jordan's story where Parallax wasn't him; it was the embodiment of fear possessing him, basically.
Mm. Yeah.
So like I feel like those things have really like become just iconic canon moments, and I kind of
Right.
forgot that he created them. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
but honestly, seeing all the cool lantern stuff in this story made me kind of like depressed that we haven't really seen anything that good in live action.
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
hope the new DCU will be able to do that. I mean, we have the Green Lantern movie, but it's not the best.
Yeah. Did you have I have but do you remember I was like 2011 there was a Green Lantern cartoon. Did you see any of that?
I watched most of it. Yeah, I really enjoyed
Okay.
that
Was that
actually.
any okay.
It
Okay.
was, it's
'Cause I remember
definitely.
watching commercials for it. I've never actually seen it.
I haven't watched it in a long time, so like I was much younger. I don't know if it's like how juvenile
Mhm.
it is, but it is very cool
Yeah.
because they have most of the like because one of the main characters is a Red Lantern.
Mm.
Atrocitus and the Red Lanterns are like the main villains for most of it. But they also
Okay.
introduce the Star Sapphires. They introduce the Blue Lanterns. That's actually, I think, my first introduction to most of the like
Mm.
definitely the Blue Lanterns, and maybe
Okay.
the Red Lanterns. So that was actually pretty cool. And I guess Young Justice made that series canon. So, um,
Okay.
they
That's cool.
took because like because there's this one character, a Red Lantern, who ends up like joining the main Green Lantern characters and kind of like becomes a good guy throughout the series.
Mhm.
And in Young Justice, he shows up at some point, and
Uh,
yeah, like that character. And I guess I forget exactly what happens, but somehow he ends up getting a hold of a Blue Lantern ring. So he literally has two, like both the red and Blue Lantern
okay.
rings at the same time. It's actually pretty cool,
Mhm.
but
Interesting.
I think that series is worth checking out. I haven't watched it in a long time, but I remember it being pretty
Okay.
good. It's probably some of
Cool.
the best Green Lantern content. I mean, to be honest, it's not like
Yeah. I mean,
I
yeah.
I feel like there's such untapped resources because I feel like there's so many cool stories in the comics, and they just haven't done much with it, especially in live action.
Yeah, I feel like that's true of most of DC. I
That's
was
fair.
reading in the past doing this podcast, there's like so many cool stories like
Yeah.
and I've just been doing Flashpoint and Crisis
Yeah.
like again and again. It's like there's a lot of other really cool stories out there.
Or just like Superman and Batman, like rebooting them every 5 years.
Right, right.
Yeah. So I see, and like I think occasionally they try to branch out, but either it isn't very good or like nobody watches it. So
Hmm. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope yeah the new DCU can do some. Well, I mean they already have a Booster Gold series like lined up, and that's a very like lesser
Yeah.
known character. I hope they tap some of those interesting storylines. But
Hmm.
yeah, before we wrap things up, what was your cultured pick for this week?
Yeah, this week I picked Superman, The Adventures of Superman, John Kent #6,
Mm-hmm.
and this is the final issue of the miniseries, and
Yeah.
it's really interesting because it kind of it tackles the idea of like what is Superman? Like we've seen like
Mm-hmm.
that character deconstruction before, but that was specifically just with Clark Kent. But now like
Yeah.
with the prime Clark Kent out of the equation, like what is Superman? Like what does that mean?
Yeah.
For these different characters. I think it's really cool. Have we explore like the different ways that the different versions of Superman can like interpret their power and use it. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
And it ended in a very way that I wasn't expecting. And
Yeah.
online, I guess it's kind of controversial, but I
Yeah.
really liked it.
Yeah, I feel like I would have preferred maybe a little more resolution, but I think
Sure.
it was a pretty good ending. I saw some people complaining online that he
Mhm.
didn't just like I guess straight up murder Injustice Superman or something. They were like he gave him a hug,
Right.
what a pussy, you
Yeah.
know.
Exactly.
But I really like what they're doing with John Kent, and they're kind of trying to make him
Yes.
stand on his own, while at the same time he's trying to emulate the best qualities of his dad, but not just his dad, like
Right.
what the Superman symbol stands for. And
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
think they're doing a really good job making him stand on his own while also,
Mhm.
adding to the Superman mythos, I guess.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really like his new powers, which are pretty cool. Like
Yes.
the
Yes.
whole like exploding like well, it's not just exploding, like it basically supercharges him for a short amount of
Right.
time, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Exactly.
planning on covering that miniseries soon on the podcast, like all the way
Yeah.
through, so that should be interesting.
Hmm.
But my pick this week, I kind of forgot that I picked this up, but I just remembered it recently. I picked up a few weeks ago, but it's Venom Lethal Protector number like no, it's yeah, Venom Lethal Protector 2 number 1. They like did a new
Okay.
Lethal Protector series.
Yeah, I read
And
that when it came out. Yeah.
okay, yeah, I thought the main thing that I found interesting was what they're, because at some point in the story, Eddie Brock, like current Eddie Brock, is fighting his past self, who is
Mm.
Venom, and current Eddie Brock doesn't really have anything, but by the end, he kind of becomes a new toxin, I guess. But what I found interesting is just like the contrast, how he is sort of be able to view his past self and be like, yeah, I was kind of a roided out douche, you know? Like
Yeah.
there is even a thing like, hey, his past self like in the 90s was like really ripped, whereas the current version is more just like a normal sized person. And it
Mm.
was very interesting him having interactions with his past self. When it wasn't really his past self, it was like some, I don't know, like memories of his past self or something like that. It was kind of
Yeah.
complicated, but I did find that was interesting. I feel like that was some of the most interesting like Eddie Brock character development that we've seen in a while in the
Mm.
comics. But then again, I haven't really been like keeping up super well. So, but I just
Yeah.
thought that was an interesting take on Eddie.
Yeah. For
But
sure.
yeah, that is the episode this week. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's The Cultured Pull List. If you would like to help support us so we can keep bringing you more content, check us out on patreon.com/theculturednerd and look for our show's specific tier. Thank you to all of our current Patreon supporters: Wesley H., Mitch S., Connor Y., Anna M., Oscar B., Craig L., and Salib K. We really could not do this without you. I have been your host, Michael Malillo, and my co host, though he was here very briefly, was Luke S. Thank you so much to Jose Navarro, who designed our visual assets, and thank you once again for joining us. If you liked this video, leave a like and subscribe. And if you'd like to check us out on social media, you can scan the QR code on the bottom left. And if you'd like to check out Casual Experts, me and Luke's other brand, you can scan the QR code on the bottom right.